Events of the past and present shape tomorrow. Our vital concern is you, today's youth, for our future depends on you. Before attempting to figure out where we're all going, it is imperative for us to have a strong awareness of where we have been. To untangle today's problems, we need to understand yesterday. This film series hopefully will in part make you aware of people, places, and events which have helped shape our nation and our world. Manufacturers Hanover is pleased to sponsor this educational film. Manufacturers Hanover, it's banking the way you want it to be.
Your attention, please. Now riding for the Brooklyn Dodgers, number 42, Jackie Robinson. To commemorate America's black heritage, the United States Post Office has issued a stamp honoring Jackie Robinson, the man who broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball.
Jackie Robinson has been described as explosive, fierce, controversial, exciting, dynamic, electrifying, tempestuous, opinionated, daring, fiercely competitive, outspoken, combative, clutch-performing, on and on. All of that is true. He was, for me, the single most exciting athlete I ever saw. And he was something that obviously transcended baseball and transcended sports. He was a fundamental building block, a keystone, if you please, of the entire civil rights movement in this country.
From the very beginning, I was a little old and I had to take care of him, take him to school before he was old enough so I could watch him while he played in the sandbox because my mother worked. He had no one to take care of him but me, so I had to take him to school. At that time, even before he started school, in kindergarten and first grade, the kids would bring apples or a sandwich for him to play on their team. My mother made him a little rag ball and carried it with her all the time. And it was just a natural athlete.
In college, Jackie was also a natural. At UCLA, he became the first athlete in the school's history to star in 4 sports. College athletics had never seen anything like him before. In the 1939-40 football season, Jackie averaged an astonishing 12 yards per carry and was an honorable mention All-American. In basketball, he led the Pacific Coast Conference in scoring for 2 years. At UCLA, Jackie met his future wife, Rachel Issam. But before they could marry, World War II intervened. Jackie went into the Army, where he was almost court-martialed for refusing to sit in the back of a bus. His insistence on human dignity would not accept the Jim Crow laws of the South that segregated the races and made second-class citizens of American Negroes. And finally, in 1944, Robinson was honorably discharged from the Army. 2 years later, Jackie and Rachel were married at last. Like most educated blacks who had fought for America, he was not prepared to return to a nation that denied him his basic civil rights. Even as recently as the early 1960s, blacks and whites in the South went to separate schools. Blacks were not served in white-only restaurants, were forced to sit in the backs of buses, and could not even use the same public restroom facilities as whites. And in 1945, if a black man wanted to play baseball or any other professional sport, he played in the Negro Leagues or he didn't play. Here in this rare footage is a glimpse of life in the other baseball league. A season of long, tiring bus trips, 3 and 4 games in a day. And in the South, no service in white-only restaurants and no rooms in white hotels. Segregation was both the law and custom of the land, and no group was more scrupulous in its observance of custom than organized baseball. Jackie signed with the Kansas City Monarchs for the then munificent sum of $400 a month. A teammate was the immortal Satchel Paige, who would not reach Major League Baseball for another decade. But great changes were beginning to sweep across post-war America, and ultra-conservative, all-white Major League Baseball was to become the scene of one of the greatest social experiments in the nation's history. Ranch Rickey, the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, was determined to break the color barrier of the major leagues. Jackie Robinson was his choice to become the first black man to play in lily white organized baseball. In August 1945, he signed Jackie to a contract to play the next season with the Montreal Royals, then the Dodgers' top minor league farm team. Jackie tore up the International League, winning the batting title and leading the Royals to the pennant and to victory over the Louisville Colonels in a racially tense Little World Series. Robinson scored the winning run in the deciding game and finished the series hitting .400. For Branch Rickey, there was no question of where Jackie Robinson would play next season. In an exclusive interview, Happy Chandler, then Commissioner of Baseball, describes his role in bringing Jackie Robinson into the major leagues.
That was 1947, and the owners had a meeting at the Waldorf Astoria in New York in January of that year, and they had anticipated that the Brooklyn team might want to bring him from Montreal to Brooklyn, and they debated it. Then they voted 15-1 not to let him play. Mr. Rickey, who was their general manager, called me and said, I want to come to see you. In the view of this vote, he said, I can't do this unless I'm assured of your complete cooperation and support. And I said, Mr. Rickey, I know that. And I said, you bring this fella in, and I'll approve of the transfer of his contract from Montreal to Brooklyn. And if I don't do that, he don't play. It's as simple as that. There was opposition to it, especially from the Southerners. They had very strong feelings. I'm a Southerner, but I didn't have the feeling. I told Mr. Rickey I had the feeling that these fellows had been out atolls of the Pacific fighting and offering to die for their country, and then to have them come back home and say you can't play the game that our people play in peacetime. I said, that don't seem fair, and I'm wholly unwilling to perpetuate it.
Ebbets Field, April 10, 1947. During an exhibition game between the Brooklyn Dodgers and the Montreal Royals, Branch Rickey sends the press a terse one-line statement. The Brooklyn Dodgers today purchased the contract of Jackie Robinson from Montreal. The color barrier in Major League Baseball had finally been broken. The Dodgers had quite a few Southern ball players, including stars such as Pee Wee Reese and Dixie Walker. Reese, who many expected to be hostile to Robinson, was one of the first Dodgers to extend the hand of friendship. In spring training, Reese had said, I never met Jackie Robinson, but I believe he deserves a chance just like anyone else. 1 week later, Robinson was in the lineup at first base. His Major League debut was less than auspicious with 1 hit in 4 at-bats. Thereafter, he burned up the league, finishing with a .297 batting average, 12 home runs, and selection as Rookie of the Year. Those stats were posted under the most trying circumstances imaginable. Protests by the Ku Klux Klan, death threats, and most trying of all, having to take racist insults from other ball players without fighting back. Nigger, we don't want you here, shouted Phillies players. The taunts continued for 3 days, grew unbearable. To hell with Mr. Rickey's noble experiment, thought Robinson. What a glorious, cleansing thing it would be to let go. Then I thought of Mr. Rickey. He had come to a crossroads and made a lonely decision. I was at a crossroads. I would make mine. I would stay. As the season progressed, virtually all the Dodgers accepted Jackie as a full-fledged member of the team. They all seemed to have adopted Branch Rickey's reasoning. I signed Jackie Robinson for one reason, to win the pennant. I'd play an elephant with pink horns if he could help us win the pennant. And that's what Jackie Robinson did. In his rookie season, the Dodgers won the National League pennant and the right to face the awesome New York Yankees in the 1947 World Series. They lost in 7 games, despite several brilliant individual efforts. More important, it marked the beginning of the Robinson years, perhaps the most exciting years baseball has ever had. Spring training 1948. The Dodgers are about to become the most integrated team in baseball history. Joining Robinson, Reese, and the other stars are a black catcher and pitcher, Roy Campanella and Don Newcomb. Baseball's color line, and with it the racial stereotypes so long a part of American society, have been smashed forever. But still, the Negro in baseball must walk carefully. Roy Campanella.
Mr. Rickey called Jackie Robinson and myself into the Dodger office, and he told us one thing. He said, "Now I have stuck my neck out for you fellas. Please do not let them cut it off." Those words have stuck with me all of my life, and I can still recall them very well. And every day we played, I know Jackie and myself remember those words.
Off the field, Jackie Robinson also became a force, a voice of the American Negro, testifying before Congress during the Cold War, when politicians saw communists everywhere.
I am a religious man. Therefore, I cherish America where I am free to worship as I please, a privilege which some countries do not give. And I suspect that 999 out of almost any 1,000 colored Americans you meet will tell you the same thing. But that doesn't mean that we're going to stop fighting race discrimination in this country until we got it licked. It means that we're going to fight it all the harder, because our state and the future is so big, we can win our fight without the communists, and we don't want their help.
On the field, Jackie became an authentic superstar, leading the Dodgers to 5 pennants in his 10 years with the club. And always in the fall, their World Series opponents were the arch-rival New York Yankees. And when the series was done, the same mournful cry would rise up from Brooklyn, wait till next year. 1955 started out no differently. In the first game, top of the 8th, the Yankees lead 6-4. Robinson, aging, aching, injured most of the year, is not expected to be much of a factor. But suddenly he is perched on third base. Whitey Ford, the Yankee pitcher, ignores him. Robinson's speed is but a memory, but his desire burns as fiercely as ever. Suddenly, Robinson is roaring down the line. The Yankees managed to hang on and win games 1 and 2. Robinson's electrifying steal at home has galvanized the Dodgers. The series goes 7 games, but when it is over, the Brooklyn Dodgers have won the first World Series in their history. The next year, 1956, was Robinson's last. Traded by Dodger owner Walter O'Malley to the arch-rival New York Giants, Jackie retired. His pioneering opened not merely professional sports to black Americans, but seemed to also create a ferment that exploded into the civil rights movement of the late 50s and 60s. Working with leaders such as Martin Luther King, Jackie Robinson continued to blaze a path for his people.
And he went into baseball, not for himself, but for his people. And he proved that. But the first year he told him that many times he thought about stopping because the pressure was so hard. He said, no, I went into it for my people, so I will go on with it. And he did, and that's what his life was all about, helping others.
In 1962, 10 years before his untimely death, Jackie Robinson was elected to baseball's Hall of Fame. Even as his life transcended baseball, it is perhaps fitting that he be recalled not only as the man who broke the color barrier, but as a man who stamped the game with his exploits and his personality. Robinson could hit and bunt and steal and run, wrote author Roger Kahn in The Boys of Summer. He had intimidating skills, and he burned with a dark fire. He wanted passionately to win. He bore the burden of a pioneer, and the weight made him more strong. If one can be certain of anything in baseball, it is that we shall not look upon his life again.
Manufacturers Hanover has been pleased to sponsor this educational film. Manufacturers Hanover, it's banking the way you want it to be.